On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
So what do we have in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, we start off with Richard Freeman and me on the shores of Loch Ness as we examine the latest alleged Loch Ness Monster video, which it has been claimed provides definitive proof of the existence of the mythical beastie. Does it? Well, you're just going to have to wait and find out. And then we go to Australia with our old friend Ian Squibbs to take a look at one of the most notorious sea monster photographs, the Hook Island sea serpent.
I really like the old credits.
Well, Rossiter, how's that holiday going that you sent the kids from the Brixton Youth Outreach group on? You sent them off on holiday, didn't you? Oh yes, I sent them camping in Copenhagen. And what's happening with them now? Oh Barry, they are on their way back to Brixton, and I made sure their flight was on a DC-10.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and here, asleep in the crook of my elbow, is Lilith Tinkerbell, and she's a cat. And every Saturday afternoon and every Wednesday evening we bring you, if you like, a melange of hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality? Well, you're just going to have to wait and see. There, waiting time over.
Attack of the Martian Hitlers! Attack of the Martian Hitlers! Attack of the Martian Hitlers! Attack of the Martian Hitlers!
Believe it or not, there are people who say that because Richard and I do things like Attack of the Martian Hitlers, that we are bringing cryptozoology into disrepute. What I think brings cryptozoology into disrepute is not two men in late middle age pissing about, but it's the people who continue to tout pictures of blobs in the middle distance that could be anything as conclusive proof that the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or whatever exists. I know that over the years I've been fairly scathing about some of the pictures that have been produced by the indefatigable Owen O'Fadigan, and I'm afraid some people are going to think I'm going to be doing the exact same thing now. But I know, in fact, I'm absolutely certain that Owen is a good bloke and believes implicitly in the images he has managed to get from the Loch Ness webcams. This is the latest of them, and this, by any standard, is far better than his usual average images. But is it good enough to be what the Daily Mirror said? Conclusive proof of the reality of the Loch Ness Monster. Check this out. The image quality of this piece of footage is really rather good, and it does appear to show something small and low in the water moving along. and it does seem to be moving probably under its own steam, as it were, although it isn't clear whether or not there are currents in the lake here which could give an inanimate object the appearance of being animate. Bizarrely, it reminds me of the first of the images produced by the notorious Frank Searle, whom Ian Squibbs, who we're going to have on the show in a minute, did a great in-depth examination of only a few weeks or months ago. His first image is the only one that anybody gives any credence to, and it does look a bit like this. And I remember saying to Ian that I thought that this image looked like a floating mat of vegetables, because vegetable matter, because you could see twiggy things sticking in the air. But it had at the rear something which some people have said was a tail, and it's interesting to see that the same image, the same tail if you like, because a tail does not necessarily mean that it's attached to a living creature, it could just be the rear end of an inanimate one. And the tail on the rear end of this moving piece of footage that Owen O'Fadigan has taken looks remarkably like that on the first picture from Frank Searle. But is it conclusive proof that there is a giant creature living in Loch Ness? Well, as far as I'm concerned, no. But I'm now going to wake up Richard Freeman, who is cuddled up with the dog on the sofa, and we're going to debate the matter like gentlemen. So, Richard, what do you think of Mr. O'Fadigan's latest?
How anybody can say that's conclusive proof of the Loch Ness Monster is completely beyond me. It's conclusive proof of a shape moving in the distance that could be just about anything from a floating log to a wave formation.
Do you see the similarity between that and the first of Frank Searle's pictures?
Yes, the first of Frank Searle's piss poor pictures. Yeah, the one that was a log.
Yes, I think it was probably the only one of the pictures that he didn't retouch or bugger about with at all.
Yes.
That doesn't mean to say that it was a monster of any kind. So, what do you think of this? Do you think this shows an inanimate object like a log?
It's impossible to say. It could show a log or some debris being dragged along by an undercurrent. It could show some animal swimming at the surface. It could be a wave formation. We don't know.
Well, one of the difficult positions that this puts me in is, although I agree with Richard, I don't think it's conclusive proof of anything apart from the fact that some journalists working for some papers will make up any old crap in order to sell newspapers and get their copy in on time. I know, I've done it, I've been there, and having been a member of Her Majesty's Press, I suppose it's His Majesty's Press now, is not actually something of which I'm particularly proud. But although I don't mind ripping the almighty piss out of the Fourth Estate, I do object to the idea of being rude about the efforts of well-meaning fellows like Mr. O'Fadigan, who obviously is fascinated with the Loch Ness mystery and spends more hours than I think anybody else in the world scrutinising the webcams to see if you can see the monster. And I would hate to rain on his parade. I would hate to put him off. and have him think, oh, well, that fat bugger on the track, he doesn't think any of my pictures are worth anything, so I'm going to give up. I don't want to do that at all. But I don't think that yet Mr. O'Fadigan has managed to produce images which are conclusive proof of the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. But if and when conclusive proof is found, especially if it's found on the webcam, nobody deserves to find it more than Owen O'Fadigan. So keep on watching that webcam, boy. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again with our old friend Ian Squibbs, who, as I'm sure you remember, went all around the shores of Loch Ness, finding some of the places where the famous Loch Ness monster sightings and photographs took place. And he filmed it all and told us all about it for your delectation here on track. And he's back today and he's talking about something which totally by chance was my first introduction to cryptozoology. Because as some of you will know, I lived in Hong Kong when I was a child. And in about 1967, the Hong Kong radio program that I was listening to talked about how somebody had filmed a sea monster with a wound in its head off the coast of Australia. And this totally and utterly blew me away. I was only about 7 or 8 years old. And although I wasn't to find out any more about it until I read Huygens' books in the late 1970s, it did, in many ways, put me on the track which leads to where we are now. So welcome, Ian. Tell us all about what we have today.
Well, thank you very much, John, and it's good to be back on CFZ TV. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about what I consider one of the classic sea monster encounters, mainly due to the striking images and photos that come with the sighting. So without further ado, let's look at the Hook Island sea monster. So a bit of background first. So Hook Island is one of the Whitsunday Islands off the coast of the Australian state of Queensland. The island is almost uninhabited, quite rugged, and almost completely contained within the Whitsunday Islands National Park. The island is noted for its colourful underwater coral growths, which is popular with diving and snorkeling enthusiasts. In the summer of 1964, French photographer Robert Lisserec and his family purchased a motorboat and decided to stay on Hook Island for several months, joined by their Australian friend Henk de Jong. On December the 12th, the group were crossing Stonehaven Bay on the east side of the island in their boat when Robert's wife noticed a strange object on the bottom of the lagoon. The object was a 30-foot-long creature which looked like a giant tadpole laying motionless. The family then started taking pictures of the creature. So what we'll do, John, first, let's just look at the first image that they caught on film. Let's just have a look at that, the giant tadpole image there. It's quite an image, and I think it's one of the best sea monster photos. It's better than anything that Frank Searle came up with anyway, wouldn't you agree there? So it's not the classic plesiosaur type creature or the many-humped undulating monster. It's a bit of a different take on the sea serpent there, but you know, it's certainly a good image. So what do you make of it, John? That was the story that you came across when you lived in Hong Kong in 1967, got you into cryptozoology. What was your thoughts when you first saw the image?
Well, I didn't see the image for many years. But when I did, my first thought, because I was still a schoolboy when I saw the image, was that doesn't look like a tadpole. It was far too long and elongate. And all these years, I'd had the image of something with a round body and a squiggly tail at the back of it with an injured head. But when I saw it, my first thought was it looked like an eel. And
Yes.
even then, I knew that the creature that Huygens was called a super eel was one of the well-known types of sea serpents. I thought this actually looks far more convincing than most of the sea monster or lake monster footage I've ever seen.
There's one called the yellow belly as well, one part of Hooverman's classification, which has a big head and then a long tail, and maybe that's the closest that's come to closest you can compare this to the classifications of sea monster. But even so, big head, long tail. I thought it was quite a good image. That you don't see it. That I find you don't see it as much as you would think you would in Fortean literature, though you do come across it. I didn't come across the image until later in my reading. But anyway, what we'll do then, let's continue with the encounter. As the group moved closer to the creature, Le Serac and De Jong decided to jump into the water with the intent of filming the beast. As they approached the monster, they estimated that it was more like 75 to 80 feet long. Initially, they assumed the animal was dead, but as they got closer, the serpent opened its mouth and started moving towards them. Obviously startled, they returned to their boat. By the time they had reached the safety of the boat, the creature had fled. They reported seeing a wound on the right side of the creature. They surmised that it may have been wounded by a ship's propeller and had taken refuge in the shallow lagoon. Le Serac described the creature as follows. It was only when we got within 20 feet of the serpent that we could see its head clearly. The head was large, about 4 feet from top to bottom, with jaws about 4 feet wide. The lower jaw was flat, like that of a sandfish. The skin was smooth, but rather dull, brownish-black in colour. The eyes seemed pale green, almost white. The skin looked more like that of a shark than an eel. There were no apparent scales, nor we could see any parasites around. We suppose the flexible tail would have shaken any off. There were no fins or spines, nor were there any apparent breathing openings, although there must have been some. Perhaps we didn't see them because our attention was mainly focused on the creature's menacing mouth, inside of which we could see, which was mainly whitish inside. The teeth appeared to be small. A fragment of some dark substance hung from the upper row of teeth, possibly a fish. As the monster was laying on the sandy bottom, we could not see the colour of its belly. The creature was about 90 feet long. Behind the head, the body was about 2 feet 4 inches thick, which remained that way for about 25 feet, then gradually tapered into a whip-like tail. The general colour of the body was black, 1 foot wide brownish rings every 5 feet, the first starting just behind the head. The skin was smooth but dull. So that's what Le Serac described. Now, they did manage to get some more closer up photos of the head. So let's just move on to the second photo there, John. There's 2 shots of the head close up, and we can see that there. Maybe you can see the 2 eyes. There's 2 smallish eyes on top of the head. And maybe the mouth as well. Obviously, it's a bit blurry as it's taken through the water, but it's definitely some kind of creature there. And then also what we'll do as well, John, if you look at the next photo as well, if we move into that one, this is the lesser known photo of the full body. If we look at that, taken from the side, a different angle there, Now, I find that not as impressive as the first image, the more famous image, which is taken head on and gives the creature a more of a dynamic appearance. So
Now,
yeah.
I'll tell you something very,
Hmm.
very strange, because you have just said that the third image is the lesser known one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the image I've seen, that one. And
Yes.
I don't think I'd ever seen the first one. And so when
Really?
I said to you that I didn't think it looked very much like a tadpole, I don't think this third one, which looks long and thin and eel-like, which is the thing that's been stuck in my head for all these years, I didn't think that looked like an eel, but the first one does look tremendous. Looks like a tadpole. But the third one, I think, looks very elongated and with a ball.
Yes. Yes. It does, and yeah, the angle of the first one sort of, it does sort of squash up the body somewhat, but give it that more, I think and also as well, it's in color. This that second image there is not. I couldn't find a color image of that. It's not very good quality anyway, but so there we go. So yeah, there we go. Anyway. So they're the photos he got and the story that Le Chirec had within there. So anyway, Le Chirec's story and photos were first published in the March 1965 edition of Australia's Everyman magazine. So cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson investigated Le Chirec and found out that he had initially tried and failed to sell the story to the US media to get the best price. Sanderson concluded that the photos didn't show an animal, but it might be either a plastic bag used by the US Navy for towing petrol, a deflated skyhook balloon which had become covered in weed, or a roll of cloth which had been tied together in places. Cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans was suspicious too and made inquiries and found that Le Chirec had actually told friends that he was about to go away and make a lot of money from something which involved a sea serpent. Heuvelmans favoured the plastic sheet weighed down by sand explanation for the creature, and he noted that the position of the eyes was highly suspicious, given that most vertebrates have eyes on the side of the head or nearer the snout. Heuvelmans also said Le Chirec had left unpaid creditors in France, and he did not seem very trustworthy. There was also a claim that he was wanted by Interpol. So a dodgy character, Le Chirec. It's always worth looking into the background as well of these people who take the photos. A bit like Roger Patterson, for example. He had a background related to trying to make money out of Bigfoot. If you look into some of the literature written about him, especially a book called The Making of Bigfoot by a guy called Greg Long. That's quite a good read if you can get your hands on a copy. And that looks into the background of Patterson. And you think, yes. Anyway, debunkers also point out that you can see light patches in part around the edges of the creature, suggesting that it is probably a plastic sheeting being weighed down by sand. So there you go. So yeah, that's the Hook Island sea monster. Basically, the character assessment of the photographer and some of the analysis suggests that it's a fake. What do you think, John? Do you think it's a fake, or what do you think is a real tadpole type creature?
I think it's probably a fake, but I'd like to know more about Le Chirec and what happened to him afterwards.
Apparently he was living in Asia in 2003, and they were trying to, an interview was trying to be arranged, but I cannot find too much on the background of Le Chirec, or really a lot more about the sighting itself and the people involved. So yeah, maybe that doesn't help either with its authenticity.
Do we know where in Asia?
No, just in Asia. I suppose if you really try and look into it and find out, then you can probably find where. But I would think he's probably dead now. This was 1964. He took the photo. So.
Well, not necessarily. If he was, I don't know, in his 30s or 40s, that means he's only going to be in his 80s.
I suppose so, yeah.
But it depends where in Asia, because Asia is the biggest of the continents. So it could be anywhere from Vladivostok to Turkey.
Exactly. Probably Southeast Asia.
Hmm.
Probably near Australia, as that's where he was hanging out. But yeah, that's the sighting in a nutshell. What we can do, the finish on now, what we'll do, as you know, that when talking about a Fortean subject, I like to follow it up with a visit to the scene of the crime, if you like. But unfortunately, I won't be doing that this time, as the encounter took place in Australia, so it's a bit of a hike. So, and it's a shame, really, because I did used to live in Australia many moons ago, but it never crossed my mind to take the time out to visit Hook Island and see if the monster was still around. So, anyway, but however, I was able to visit the scene using the magic of Google Maps. So what I did was I studied the background of the first photo, and I could see the two small islands in the background. So you've got the creature in the foreground, then you've got the guy in the boat, and in the background, two small islands. So I located Stonehaven Bay, and there in the distance were two small islands. So if you go to the next photo there, John, I sent you. That's just the final photo. You can have a look there. You know, that's roughly the spot. So. And there you go. That's what I found on Google Earth. And to think that it was on that stretch of water that the Hook Island monster lay all those years ago. And there you go. Thank you very much.
You've got something long and straight in the foreground. It looks.
Is there?
Yes, on the.
Let's see. Well. Yeah, so there is. So maybe the Hook Island monster was real, and it's returned to its lair. But yeah,
and it's obviously got some sort of chameleon-like power, because the object that it is impersonating looks like it's a long concrete man-made something or other.
Yes, maybe it's the son of the original monster come back.
The return of the son.
The original, the Shrek killed the original monster by putting a diving tank in its mouth and then shooting it, and explode it. So that's how they.
I'm sure.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page, and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody but for whom the show would not have been made. That is my little dog Archie, who is rattling the bangly thing on his collar and making an annoying noise, which happens on and off all the way through the show. I want to say a big thank you to Richard Freeman and to Ian Squibbs for being my guests this week. I want to say a big thank you to my producer Louis and to my carer and the Deputy Director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, Graham Inglis. And of course I'd like to say a big thank you to Miss Shelley and Miss Judy, my two long-suffering housekeepers, and Miss Karen, my long-suffering secretary, but for whom I really wouldn't be able to function. So thank you to all of you. And I also want to send my love and good wishes and get well soons to Miss Maxine all the way in Southend-on-Sea, who isn't very well at the moment. But we're all hoping and praying for swift recovery so she can come down and see us in the spring. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back on Wednesday. Do I know what's in Wednesday's show? No, because we've run out of the films that Richard took for us at the ASAP conference. I've got no idea what's happening on Wednesday, but there will be something on Wednesday at 6:30. And next Saturday, there will be another show from me at 3, and what's going to be in it? You're just going to have to wait and see. So, are you ready, Mr. McCrinnan? If you guys are all going to be there to watch, I'll be seeing you.